Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. Today, we're talking about video games. We're going to talk about whether your kids should play them and how you will know, which games they should play, and then we're actually going to walk through a list of if my children were going to play games, these are the kinds of games I would want them to play, and some cautions on some games that, you know what, they might be popular or they might even be well-intentioned, but keep an eye on them. So let's start from the top. When I talk to families about video games, there's usually one of two things going on. Either the family knows nothing about video games, but their kids go to school, or they talk to their friends, they go to co-op, and they go, you know what, Mom or Dad, can I participate in this activity? And sometimes the knee-jerk reaction is, no, it's on a screen. Absolutely not. So we want to talk that out. And then sometimes there's a family member within the family who's super into video games and the kid wants to participate. And so those are the two sides we're talking from, both to parents who have no idea if this is something your child should do, and from parents who may have disagreements within their own family. How do we talk this out for our children, though? Like, it's one thing if a spouse wants to do it. It's an entirely different thing if my 6-year-old or my 8-year-old or my 14-year-old wants to do it. How do we know? So that's where we're taking this conversation. The very first question we're going to address is just, should we play video games as Christians using our borrowed time to see God's kingdom come and his will be done? Are video games a reasonable outlet? And the short version is, yes. I think the only argument we have for no is if we are going to go so far as to say we should not participate in any kind of entertainment. I would agree. Video games are not just like any other entertainment. Playing a video game and listening to music, specifically live, let's say played music by people in the same room as you, right? Those are two different forms of entertainment. But there is absolutely a place to play a designed experience, and just because it's digital doesn't make it bad. So playing a sport, or watching a movie, or watching a play, or participating in live music, or playing a board game, or reading a fictional book. These are all variations of a similar process. The problem with video games is many of them are designed to be unhealthy. They're designed not to give you a cool experience, but to keep your eyes on a screen. They're designed to take your time and your focus and your money. And underneath that, so that's the manipulative part of video games. Underneath that, though, there is something about video games that can be really, really tricky. So I want to say, no, there's nothing morally wrong with playing video games. I will also note, if your child's going to struggle with technology, video games are really high up there. Video games and social media. And what we're seeing is actually boys for video games. Social media is mostly girls who struggle with unhealthy use of the platform. That's not one-to-one. It's not only boys in video games, but vast majority, we're talking over half of problematic gamers are going to be boys. In fact, it's almost like 9 out of 10 gamers are boys currently. All right, now I'm stating. The Entertainment Software, with the association, ESA, would say that actually it's almost 50-50 boys, girls. But when you look at core gamers, people that are gaming more than 20 hours a week, those people are 9 out of 10 boys. So I wanted to break that down because there has been massive growth in the gaming field, specifically from women and from adult women. So moms playing video games, and then young women playing video games. There's been a huge growth market in gaming. So please don't get me oversimplifying this. But that wasn't the point of this conversation. The point was, is it wrong to play games? No. We need to recognize we're using borrowed time. We need to recognize that when we play something fictional and fun, that we are doing it because it extends our joy in other areas. We want to enjoy time together. That's why we do a movie night with my family. Those movies are not always biblically focused. They're not all Bible stories. Sometimes it's just a story of someone having an adventure and dealing with problems and solving it. And that's okay. We can just sit down and enjoy. Sometimes they're actually about video game characters. My kids love the Mario Brothers movie. So they can be silly, they can be fictional, they can even be based on video games, which apparently is a thing, like the Sonic movie, and then apparently there's a Star Fox movie, and like video games are going to be the new Marvel universe, where instead of it being Thor and, Captain America, it's going to be Mario and Luigi and Link and all those characters. Come on, Metroid. You can get a movie. I believe in you. So I guess Samus can get her movie. But The questions we need to ask then is, all right, if it's not morally wrong to play a game, how do we make this decision as either a family with no experience in gaming or who's having some disagreement on gaming? The first is it a priority? First thing you need to ask is, do video games make sense for our family to put as a first thing first? And if your top 5 is, all right, my spouse, my kids, my faith, my work, and being healthy, some kind of hobby, exercise, right? Like, does it fit in those 5? For some of you go, you know what, that's my hobby. Cool. Make sure that I didn't say just have a hobby. I said be healthy. So it needs to extend your health. It is possible to do. I have played video games with friends and we're still friends today. And video games are a very fond part of our past. And I haven't played a video game since May 15th, 2011, because I had a really unhealthy relationship with video games. I had to find new hobbies. Board games are part of that. Exercise was part of that. But that was a faith choice. Like, I was convicted by the Holy Spirit that my gaming was consuming my joy that the Lord was calling me to in marriage, in work, and in ministry. So video games became optional because I'm not. And that's what we're looking at here. Is it a priority for your family to fit this into the top 5? Another way to ask that question is, what are you going to give up in order to make this happen? This is what Ann and I just had a conversation on. So in our family, being an old gamer nerd, I have nostalgic experiences I want my children to have with gaming. They were an important part of my childhood. I think they're a cool part of storytelling and also in recognizing how games got to where they are. So as just a nerdy dad, I want my kids to have this. So I bought a system 5 years ago now. It's called the Analog, Analogue. Analog is the company. It's out of Seattle, Washington, here in the Pacific Northwest. And they make these old style systems that work with new chip processor sets that work on modern TVs, basically, because you can't just plug an old Nintendo into a HDMI TV these days. So I got one of these, and then I started looking up games. What games would I want? So the first game I've purchased is Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. And I want my kids to experience this. Anna and I were talking about it over Christmas break. I was like, this would be the time. Like, Owen's 11, Henry's 9. Like, let's let them have this experience. And the question Anna asked was, what would we want them to not do so that they could gain this experience? And that was super convicting to me because our kids have really joyful lives right now. They do lots of stuff they love. And when they are bored for those few minutes at a time, like, I know that boredom's important. It always drives them. They mope for a few minutes, right? They lay on the ground and like kick their feet around, and like, it might be a half hour, it might be an hour, but at some point they go and start making up games and they start making up challenges and they start thinking of other ways to make their own fun. And like, they always end up finding something they're passionate about that happens at the pace of real life. That's really cool. So my kids still haven't played it, and it's still sitting in a safe outside. And I don't play it. It's collecting dust. But the point of this is, if it's a priority for your family, you go, you know what, this is important to us. It's something we enjoy. It's something we do well. Boom. Now you know. What would you want your kids to give up that they can do this instead? Now you have that answer. If it's nothing, that then becomes your talking point. Be like, I wouldn't want our kids to do this. It isn't beneficial. The reason we picked movies over video games is because movies always have a concise end. Video games do not. Movies, their goal is not to get you to watch another one. Their goal is to entertain you, get you to show up for your 90 minutes, and then you walk away. There are a lot of games that have manipulative, I'm struggling with that word today, behavioral design through the points and through, we can go into this later, but through points and levels and quests and rewards and punishments, they get you to repeat a behavior that maybe you would have just played it because the game is fun for 15 minutes, but now you play it for 45 because you have other motivations other than the game itself. So is it a priority? Second is it safe? We've talked about this before, and this is the point of talking video games, is this is like a niche of the bigger conversations we've been having. The 6 questions you ask of technology, for example, are going to come out here, and safe, ready, good is a part of this. So safe, ready, good. Is the game safe on its face? Is your child ready for this based on their responsibilities in real life? And is the fruit good once you've given it to them? So is it safe? Safest technology is going to have no internet, no app store, no interactions with real world people, and is going to have accountability baked in. And I guess I merged one in there, but it's going to be tool tech. There's not a lot of games that are tool tech. Tool tech would be designing a game. So using something like Scratch or Unity, and you're building a game and learning how to do that. That would be the safest form. You're never going to get overstimulated, and you're never going to run into content you didn't want because you're the one put it into the game. So that's the safest. So a great example, I'll steal my thunder from later, but a great example would be Super Mario Maker 2 for the Nintendo Switch, where it's Mario But the whole premise is you're making levels. So what I've seen families do that's really cool is like, great, here's what we're going to do. There's a family with two sons. One was 2 years older, actually very similar to my boys. So they each get 30 minutes of game time, but they alternate. So today's your day to build your brother a level. You have 30 minutes, go. He builds a map or two in 30 minutes. And then they rotate. And the other brother gets his 30 minutes to play that level. And then their next time they get to play, they switch. And the other brother builds the first brother a level. And then, so it's an hour of playtime, but it's 30 and 30. And there's a creative aspect to it. It's still relational. It's still engaging. They're going to have a lot of fun. They're going to laugh at it. They might rage quit if you did something unfair, but like that's really cool. That's a cool way to take the safest tech possible across a really popular brand of Mario. All their friends know what Mario is now that there's a movie about it. And to make it so that it's as minimally overstimulating and all the goals are set by them, right? Like that's cool. There's no outside force driving that creativity, but it's the gameplay blocks are all there that they can build their own adventure with. So that would be an example of the safest possible. And then you can go up from there and you can go, all right, so safe, some games have microtransactions in them where you can spend real world money. That's going to be less safe because that's like having an app store within the game itself. There are games in which the content just isn't excellent. The design isn't excellent. So this is where I wanted to get into behavioral design, not talking content yet. Behavioral design. If the game has leveling up where you accomplish tasks and then you get better, if the game has quests, they give you 3 goals to accomplish, and you have to go out and accomplish those goals and then come back. If the game has any kind of reward system where you are getting bright, shiny lights, where you are getting medals and any kind of benefit from accomplishing a certain number of goals or in a certain way. And then if the game has what we would call just feedback, if it's got music, if it's got bright, colorful lights, especially if they flash a lot every time you do something good and it explodes in colors. If it's got haptic feedback, the controller vibrates. These are important pieces because if you don't believe me, you can ask your child to play a game with no music on and just in grayscale. So everything, there's no color and there's no sound effects. And that game will be incredibly, incredibly boring by comparison. So just know the games are intended to be engaging. Some of them do that fairly and they just make a good story and you can play through it and it's a wonderful experience to just have a fun story that you actually get to participate in. Some of them have a good story and they are a little manipulative in the way they're trying to get you to stay a little longer. And some of them have zero story. They're cheaply made. They were lazy and they are just trying to hijack your attention by giving you so many rewards. And that's the concern in behavioral design. You get really overstimulated and you can be convinced you need stuff you never wanted. The example, what I mentioned earlier, we talk about games to not play for young developing brains. Now, this game is not appropriate in terms of age level. So just read the box. It'll tell you. But Call of Duty is not meant for young gamers in twofold. One, the violence level, wild violence. But the second is that it has got behavioral design into it. The clearest example would be prestige classes, which is basically you could beat the game, say, in 15 hours. You beat the whole storyline. You can play some multiplayer, and it's fun to a point. But prestige classes are a way of tracking your points you've gained both through the storyline and through multiplayer. And it's a way of like ranking you, not based on your wins, but based on total points gained. So let's say you play the game, it's fun, you beat it in 15 hours, you play some multiplayer, you kind of get bored of it. Prestige classes come in and go, oh, but you've earned enough points, you're prestige class 1. What's that mean? It means you get a little symbol next to you, and it means you get a couple little unlocks, like this weapon now looks different, or you get this new feature. They're not incredibly life-changing features. Like it's not because you're prestige class 8, you'll suddenly beat everyone else because you're so super powerful. But they're like cool little things to talk to your friends about that motivate because now there's this FOMO. Oh, my friends are prestige class 3, but I'm still 1. They have these cool outfits or these cool weapon skins. And you will ask kids, hey, you play Call of Duty? Yeah. Have you ever played the game even though it's not fun anymore? They'll say yes. You go, why? Well, I was already so far in. I wanted to get the next prestige class. Like I just played it because I was already so invested. And that is the concern when we talk about is the game safe? There are games with designs that are inherently unsafe and they're going to make your kid dissatisfied by walking away from the game. That is a sign that either the game is wrong or something's wrong with your child. We just want to keep that in mind. Is it safe? Is your child ready then? Is looking at their reset, relationships and responsibilities, emotion, sleep, enjoyment, time in real life. Relationships and responsibilities, Does this game make them better or worse at their relationships and responsibilities, their emotions, their sleep, their enjoyment, and their time? Enjoyment being, do they still love doing diverse things, or is this the only thing they love to do now? Time, can they be okay with the time we agreed to? So now I look at my reset and go, you know what? You're doing great in real life. So I'm going to extend this opportunity. You asked me to play this game. The game itself is safe enough for us, and you're responsible enough in real life. You can go ahead and give this a shot. And then the last one is good. Is the fruit good? Does this go well? When your child plays this, do they have more love and joy and peace and patience and kindness? How about their goodness and their faithfulness and their self-control? Like, those are things we're looking at, and we can continue to extend them more opportunities if it does. And if it doesn't, we go, ooh, is this the game? Is this you in the season of life? Or is this by design and just the platform in general? It's just too much. That's me and games. Like, I just can't play a lower grade game because I get so dissatisfied and it takes so much of my heart that I'm like, if I'm going to be wasting my time, I got to be doing it with something that makes me feel amazing. And then it creates all sorts of toxic issues in my life and heart and mind. So I don't play at all. I'm that third option. You need to ask with your child, what's this fruit like? And then if it's bad, is the cause the game itself, the stage of life, like we're just in a bad spot, or nope, it's just always going to be too much for you. So safe, ready, good. With that in mind, we go, okay, but which games? This is where the 6 questions come in. So safe, ready, good is the first part. Should your child play game? Priorities, safe, ready, good. And then ask the 6 questions. Look at the characters, look at the violence, look at the language used in the game. You can go to esrb.org, search the game. It'll tell you the language used within the game. If there's live players, know that the language is going to be terrible. So I said characters, violence, language, time, the content or themes, and then the player experience. Between those 6, so characters, would we have this character over for dinner? If you want your child hanging out with this person, cool, enjoy that. If you do not, have that conversation. Go, you know what? I wouldn't let you hang out with this person in real life. Like, we're not going to give you access to this individual in a digital space, because at the end of the day, parasocial relationships are real. Your child will feel nostalgic about this experience because they will have gone through some of the simulated trauma and some of the simulated victories along with this person, and they will have this bond just like any other individual you experience hardship and victories with. That is really key. And that's something I guess I forgot to mention earlier with the behavioral design. One of the things that makes games more attractive for those of us that love them is that you get to be part of the experience. You're part of the story, and that's really beautiful. So that's something to keep in mind, that video games can be really engaging for the type of individual who's into feeling that rush of success and having easily accomplishable goals and having a story that's intended to be beaten that makes me feel like I've done something. And it can be a really subtle lie that I believe that I'm actually having accomplishment and that I have friends and that I have purpose, but it's all simulated. So some of us fall into that easier than others. Others go, you know what? I get it. It's fake. It's fun. I want to go play it with my friends, and that's okay. So just something to keep in mind I'd forgotten to mention earlier. But when we walk through that characters and violence, language, time, content, and then the player experience, we want to look at, is this a good idea? ESRB.org fits those 6 questions really well when it comes to video games, the character and the parasocial. Violence is a part of it, or the point of it. Language, again, you can look at what words are used. The time, can we agree on how much time you should be playing? And are you content with that? The content, do we agree with the messaging of this game? ESRB.org will walk you through that. You can also go just to YouTube and enter the game name and gameplay afterwards, and watch a quick 60 seconds of a video. What's this like? What's the gameplay? If there's combat, what's that look like? And then finally, the player experience. Both the culture around the game. There are some games that are fine by design, but they draw an odd crowd, and you can just get a feel from that when you watch player videos or you engage in the game culture itself. And some of it can just show up when you look up the ESRB game summary, or you can do it in other areas. Reddit always has like playthrough. If you enter it in there, if you do like game summary, it'll tell you some of the main thematic ideas. You can see what circulates around the game. But with that idea, what then games should your child play? What would I suggest? And this part of the conversation, again, my kids are not currently playing video games, but when families come and say, what should my child play? The number one answer is, if you really are into video games and you want your child to be able to play games, have your child play something from the Switch. And then the second thing I'd say is always believe the grade on the box. Right now, the group that does that ESRB is the group that puts the letter grade on the outside of the box. So E for everyone, T for teen, M for mature. Believe them. I have not found many games that miss that, especially if you're looking to bump up. So if you have a family member who's super into an M for mature game and there's a 6-year-old that wants to sit and watch, don't. It's a bad idea. It's overstimulating. It's going to be visually traumatic. It's going to be thematically way over their head. And it is not a base level we want to introduce that child to. The violence level, and more even, I would say, than the visceral violence you're seeing, is the ideas that come through it. The idea of like, this is how we solve our problems. This is something we celebrate. Watch the level of visceral violence, and now this is normal. We don't want that from most AAA violent games, whether that be God of War or Witcher or Call of Duty or whatever your game might be. Like, those are not good baseline games for a developing brain. We're talking based on child psychology, based on human development, and based on a biblical context that God is actually saying, those people that your young child cannot discern real from fake because they're just on a screen, like, and the violence is as real as it would look in real life, your child cannot discern that this is somehow bad. Someone I care about is participating in it. They seem excited about it. I'm here learning this is exciting, and we are raising up that child in the way he or she should go. So don't do those games in front of small children. That's a good baseline to start. But what should we do then? The Switch is the easiest go-to for a single solution that has some parental controls baked in, that has minimal online engagement. There's an online store. There are parental controls that can limit the interactions with that store, and there is not an easy avenue for interactions with strangers. Okay, so that's where we start. What kinds of games? Games that line up with your family expectations for content. I would say there's a company called True Play Games, trueplaygames.com. TRUPLAY. And they're a Christian video game design company. I really appreciate what they're doing. They do a really nice job. They basically, these are my words, not theirs. Their lawyers would want me to say this. They're basically the VeggieTales of video games. They have really cool characters that actually go deeper than VeggieTales ever did. Like, one of the characters has lost a brother, but he's like trying to figure out why God would take his brother away, and he doesn't understand what that means. And he's like actively wrestling with his faith in a real way when his best friend is like trying to give him hope and like pointing to Jesus. Like, it's very sweet, and I like that. And many of their games are platformer style, and they are high engagement. There's a subscription every month, and there's a lot of like points and levels and flashing lights and really, really intense gameplay, which is great if you like that. The way I would handle this is I would choose longer format games that have a distinct end and that are appropriate in terms of content and are still engaging in terms of play. So, for example, if you play like a Super Mario Brothers, you can certainly download the old ones on a Switch through their online arcade, I think is what they call it. But Super Mario Wonder, it would be an example. I wouldn't go full Super Mario Odyssey. I have a different game if you want a long form story game, but it's not that I wouldn't do it. It's just Super Mario Wonder is a shorter style play, and it mimics old style games with just lots of bells and whistles built in terms of, it's not just you have a star and you have a flower that makes you throw fireballs. Like, there's way more abilities and some really cool design features for like what the levels do. You can tell the people who made the game had fun. And I want my children to play games where the game designers clearly had some wonder and awe in their life. They're thinking creatively. They're making it happen. They convinced their bosses this would be a good idea. Like, there is still something to that. Not every game that comes out shows creativity. Reflect back on a few of the games I mentioned before. So, Super Mario Brothers Wonder, games like Kirby, Forgotten Land, like fun, silly, cute little character, but again, a single character, not trying to get you to do anything other than play a fun storyline. Super Mario Brothers Maker, I mentioned that before, but on the Switch, Super Mario Brothers Maker 2 is where you can play Mario, but you build the levels. And I love that idea. Splatoon, if your kid really wants that team combat feel, Splatoon is where these little squid spraying ink everywhere. And you use guns-ish. There are some blaster-looking things, but they look more like super soakers. And your goal is to try to paint the opponents or the map, more of the map in your color than their color. And you can paint the other team, and then they go away and have to respawn. It's creative. It's like a grade down from Fortnite in terms of violence and intensity. Overcooked is literally a cooking game. It's multiplayer. It's very silly, and it's a fun, like, interactive party game. Adults can join in. Mario Kart is a go-to. They have not made a new, there's one coming out this year, but they haven't made a new Mario Kart in like 6-8 years, like so long, because it was just good and it works, and we don't like need to make a new one. It still functions. It still looks good. It is overstimulating visually. So many flashing colors. So just watch your child in terms of the fruit side. If your child walks away and just stares for a while afterwards, like maybe it's too much. But in terms of design and content and themes, the game is good. And there are some rewards. You can play races and win medals and get rankings and play a career, but it's not punitive in terms of you haven't played in 5 days, we're taking your points. Or you're going to lose out to so-and-so, so you need to give us more time. It's simply just a racing game, and it works like racing where you compete and then you win or lose. So I do like that in terms of a fun, low-level competition. I like turn-based strategy games because they're a throwback to my childhood. So take this or leave it. Mario and Rabbids. Rabbids? I think it's rabbits, but it's just spelled weird. But it's turn-based. If you don't know what that means, it's very silly. And if you have a kid that likes rules and structure and strategy, it's a fun game for that, but it is combat-based. You take turns and beat the bad guys. All right. It's not any more intense than that. The one game drawing from deep wells of nostalgia here that's been done really well, and on the design side, I really appreciate, because the Nintendo Switch is not an overpowered gaming system for the original Switch. It's pretty low graphics ability, pretty low capabilities in terms of what modern games can do. So Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is an awesome game for what they were able to accomplish with like watercolors. So they still made it pretty. They still made it expansive. It's free roam world. You can run right to the last boss at the beginning if you really want to. You'll die, but you can. And it's problem solving focused. It's creative. Again, a game that shows that people enjoyed making it. That continues a 30-year arc of game design that I appreciate just on the side of like, this is what I want to see game design companies do. Nintendo has not yet sold out to a massive corporate side. They are porting in other games. You can play major AAA games on that platform. By that, I mean, you can play games that aren't necessarily made and designed by Nintendo Studios, but they're popular, so they're willing to sell them to you. So I'm not saying the platform itself is perfect. It has great parental accountability. And these are some games that I would want my children to play. If they're like, Mom or Dad, can we play video games? We've said yes to Mario Kart at friends' houses. We'll say yes to Overcooked. We'll say yes to Splatoon. These are games we would be okay with our children playing. The one thing with Legend of Zelda is it does have a lot of mysticism and spirituality in there. There's fairies, there's some god creatures, there's some like rough suggestions of like Buddhist idealism. Very similar to actually what you run into if you're okay with your kid watching Star Wars. It's very similar to that, like light and dark, and Ganondorf is the bad guy. And before you pick up the second one, Tears of the Kingdom, make sure you've played the first one. The second one has a fairly terrifying intro scene that I would be like, that's too much for my kids. Like, we still haven't watched the Lord of the Rings movies because bad guys in darkness. So just maybe watch that intro. You can just find it on YouTube. But those are games I would say past those 6 questions for me, that if my children were showing it's a priority for us and it's safe, ready, good, they would fit the safe category on that platform in that format. It doesn't mean it has to be that way for you, but I get that asked that a lot. But what would you play? These, because they all have a intentional design. They bring on wonder. They are well made with a purpose. They're safe enough in the content for what my kids can handle. And I like the idea of creative people made these things and had fun doing it. And that's what I want my children to do with their writing projects, with anything they make and build and design and put their lives into. I want it to bring joy both to them and then to those who then engage with it later. So I hope that's helpful in your conversations about games. I hope you feel equipped to be able to talk about video games with your child. And in the future, I can't promise a date, but in the future, I am going to try to equip you with the conversation to talk with your spouse about this specifically. But today, I hope you feel equipped to at least address video games in general. You see the way Safe, Ready, Good and Reset applies, and you can go apply that in your own life. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan at gospeltech.net. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Love God, Use Tech. And then you can join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech.